Hi class, I promised you a video about how to do genetics with using mathematics instead of Punnett squares, and so I'm going to show you how to do this. Try to make it as brief as I can. Hopefully it won't be too complicated. We'll see how things go. So I set things up here already. I have three different traits here. I have flower or three different genes. I have flower color, height, and seed shape. And then the alleles for each of these genes, we have purple being dominant, white being recessive, tall being dominant, short recessive for height, and then wrinkled and smooth. So as I have it written here, it's kind of hard to tell the P's and the W's and things, but I'll be drawing down in our Punnett squares and to show you the other stuff. So I think you'll be able to tell which is which. So let's just start with a simple one trait cross real quick. Let's say that we have two parents that are heterozygous for the flower color. Now remember, what we do is we can figure this out with a Punnett square by figuring out what the possible gametes are that each of these parents can produce and putting those around the Punnett square. So if we say this is, let's say this is the male over here, and this is the female. And so what we do is we say, okay, the male has two alleles. He has a capital P, or a dominant allele, and a recessive allele. So when this individual goes through meiosis to produce sperm, those sperm are either going to get a big P or a small p, one or the other. It's not going to get both, because as it goes through meiosis, those chromosomes are going to separate. So these alleles are on separate chromosomes, so they separate. So he's going to produce a sperm that either has a big P or a sperm cell that has a small p. Same thing for the female. So she has two alleles, each of them are on different chromosomes. And so she's going to possibly produce a big P or a small p when it comes to the eggs. And then when we do the Punnett square, we just fill this out to see what our possibilities are. And we can see that this is genotypically, this is a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Phenotypically, it's a 3 to 1 ratio. So genotypically, we have a homozygous dominant. That's 1. We have 2 heterozygotes, which is 2, and then we have 1 homozygous recessive, so we have a 1 to 2 to 1. But for phenotype, all 3 of these individuals are going to be purple, and so phenotypically we have a 3 to 1 ratio. Now we can figure that out mathematically as well. So the way we do this mathematically is we have to write down the possible genotypes that we could get for this cross, and then using mathematics and probability, we can figure out the ratio that we expect. And the way that we do this is we say, okay, what's the probability of getting this large P from the male, and what's the possibility of getting the large P from the female? So if we look back at the male's genotype, he's heterozygous, so 50% of his alleles are big P. So we say, okay, the chance of getting the big P from the male is 1/2. And we multiply that by the chance of getting the big P from the female, which is also 1/2, and that gives us 1/4. So we'd expect 1/4 of the offspring to be homozygous dominant. If we look back at our Punnett square, we see that same thing here. Next we have, well, let's look at the homozygous recessive. So the chance of getting a small p from dad is 50%, because half of his alleles are small p. Chance of getting a small p from mom is 50%, same thing. So we get 1/4, and we see that in the Punnett square as well. Now the heterozygotes are the ones that are more difficult, because there are actually 2 ways to get this, because we could have big P, small p, where we got it from mom and dad, or I'm going to put that right here, or we can have small p, big P, meaning the small p came from dad and the big P came from mom. Now we'd write it the same way. As I told you in class, we always write the dominant one first, but as you can see in this Punnett square, we got the big P, small p 2 different ways. We wrote it the same way, but we got it 2 different ways. So we have to say, okay, what's the chance of getting big P from dad? That's 1/2. The chance of getting big P from mom is also 1/2. So that equals 1/4. But then we also have to take into account what's the chance of getting small p from dad, which is 1/2, and big P from mom, which is 1/2, and that also gives us 1/4. So for total, what we have to do is we have to add this 1/4 and this 1/4 together to give us 1/2. So we have a fourth of a chance or 50% chance of getting homozygous dominant, 50% chance of getting, sorry, did I say 25% chance? I hope I said that right. 25% chance of getting homozygous dominant, 50% chance or 1/2 of getting heterozygous, and then 25% or 1/4 of getting homozygous recessive. Those equal 100%. They have to equal 100%, but those are all the options there. So that's how we do that mathematically on a small scale. So now let's look at the next situation here. Let me erase this real quick. That made sense. Let's look at a two-trait cross now and look at what we're going to be getting, and then I'll show you how to do this mathematically as well. So in a two-trait cross, let's say that we have a parent that is purple and tall, and let's cross that by, in this case, let's cross this by a parent that is white and short. That'll give us it'll make it a little bit easier than doing the double heterozygotes. Okay, so now remember, when you set up the Punnett square, we have to figure out what are the possible gametes that this individual can produce. And so the P's are going to separate in meiosis, and the T's are going to separate as well in meiosis. And so we'll end up with sperm or egg cells that have one P and one T. So what we have to figure out is what is all the combinations of P's and T's that we can form. So the father here can form a sperm cell that could have a big P and a big T. He could form a sperm cell that has a big P and a small t. He could form a sperm that has a small p and a big T, and also a small p and a small t. So those are the different possibilities of possible gametes that he can produce. Now, mom, on the other hand, she has two small p's and two small t's. So she will also produce, she'll produce eggs, and she'll produce eggs that have a combination of a p and a t as they separate in meiosis. But in this case, they're all the same. So a small p can go with a small t. We can also have this small p with this small t. Have this small p with this small t. But essentially, they're all going to be the same. All of her eggs are going to be the same because she's homozygous recessive for both traits. But those are all the different combinations that would be formed. So from there, then we fill out the Punnett square. We have big P, small t. And if you notice, all the way down is going to be the same in this case because the eggs are all the same. We could have a big P, small t, small t. Once again, it's going to be all the same. We could have a small p, big T, big T, small t. And then we could have all of them homozygous recessive like mom, and that would go down as well. So in the end, what we have is we'd have 4 possibilities to have this genotype, 4 possibilities to have this genotype, 4 for here and 4 for here. Now this genotype here codes for a purple tall individual. So the phenotype would also be 4 possibilities. This individual here would be tall but white. Would be purple and white. And so that would be 4 possibilities. This genotype here codes for a phenotype that is white and tall, and there's 4 possibilities. And this genotype codes for a phenotype that is white and short, and there's 4 possibilities. So we call this a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, 1-to-1-to-1-to-1 ratio. Or in other words, there's 25% of getting 25% chance of getting any of these phenotypes or genotypes. Okay, so now let's do this mathematically. So to do this mathematically, so we have the parents up here, and what we have to do is we have to figure out what the possible genotypes are based on these parents. Okay, so we know that these parents can form an offspring that is heterozygous for both traits. So big P can go with small p, and big T can go with small t. We can also have a individual that is heterozygous for the first trait and homozygous recessive for the second trait. Okay, we could have an individual that is homozygous recessive for the first trait and heterozygous for the second trait, or they could be, or we could have all homozygous recessive. And that's what we saw in this Punnett square here as far as the offspring go. So how would we, without doing a Punnett square, how could we mathematically figure out what the probability of each of these genotypes are? So we do it just like we did with the one trait Punnett square, except in this case now we have to multiply everything together in our two trait Punnett square. So basically we're saying, okay, what's the probability of getting heterozygous from these parents and also having heterozygous for the second trait? What's the probability of being heterozygous for the flower color as well as heterozygous for the height? So what we do is we say, okay, so what's the probability of getting a big P from one parent and a small p from this other parent? So the probability of getting a big P from the parent over here is going to be 1/2. And we multiply that by the probability of getting small p from this other parent, and that's going to be a 1. So this in total is going to be, it's going to be 1/2. Okay. And so then we're also going to take that times the probability of getting a big T from this parent over here, which is 1/2. And we're going to multiply that times probability of getting a small t from this parent, which is 1. So this equals 1/2. So then we're going to take the 1/2 from here. We're going to multiply it times the 1/2 from there. And that's going to give us, in total, that's going to equal 1/4. So the probability of getting these two traits that are both heterozygous is going to be 1/4. So the same thing over here. So we have big P, small p. So what's the probability of getting a big P and a small p from these parents? We know the one parent can give a big P half of the time. The other parent is going to give a small p all of the time. That's going to be 1/2. And then we multiply that times the probability of getting a small t from one parent is 1/2 times the probability of getting a small t from the other parent is 1/2. And so that's going to, is 1. Get rid of that there, is 1. So that equals 1/2 total. And so 1/2 times 1/2 equals 1/4. And it's going to be the same thing for these other ones as well. This is kind of maybe a simpler situation here. So what we find is, here we go. So the probability of getting a small p from the first parent is 1/2 times 1 times the probability of the big T from the first parent is 1/2 times 1. And so we get 1/4 for that. And we actually get the same thing for this last one as well. So probability of getting any one of these is going to be 1/4. That's going to equal 1 or 100%. And so the probability of getting any one of these is 25%. So that's how you do the math here. That's how you do it mathematically. So let me erase this and show you one other method here. Oops. So the other way that we can do this is we can use what we know from the Punnett squares, from one trait Punnett squares to figure out, it just shortens the math that we need to do. And what I mean by that is, so what we can do is we can look at these two parents, and instead of looking at it as two traits, we can look at it as single traits. So what I mean is we could do a one trait Punnett square for the P's. So the first parent has a big P, small p, and the other parent has a small p, small p. So when we do this Punnett square, what we find out is that based on these two parents, the probability of getting big P, small p is 1/2, and the probability of getting small p is 1/2, right? And then if we do the same thing with the T's, do another small Punnett square here. So one parent is heterozygous, the other parent is homozygous recessive, right? And so we get the same thing. So what we find out is the probability of getting a big T, small t is 1/2, and small t is 1/2. So what this does, this basically shortens our mathematical needs here. So So when we're figuring this out, what we can do is we can say, okay, so what's the probability based on these parents of getting big P, small p? Well, we come over here and look at our Punnett score and we say, okay, that's 1/2. And what's the probability of getting big T, small t? Oh, that's also 1/2. So this just shortens the amount of math that we need to do, and we see that that's 1/4. And we could do that for each of these. So probability again of big P, small p is 1/2. This probability of small t is 1/2. So we multiply those together and we get 1/4. Okay? And that's what we just continue that down and figure that out. So the other thing we can do is we can then say, okay, so what's the probability of getting an individual that has purple flowers? So in that case, we know that individuals with this genotype here are going to have purple flowers, and then this genotype also will have purple flowers. So when we do that, what we'd have to do is we'd have to add up the probability of each one, and that would give us a total of 50%. So we'd expect, based on these parents, the probability of getting an offspring with purple flowers would be 1/2. So hopefully that's making sense so far. So let me do one other, let's do one other 2-trait cross, and then let's take a look at a 3-trait cross. That's when it gets a little bit more complicated. With a 2-trait cross, you can still run a Punnett square, and everything will work out really well. But once we get to a 3-trait cross, that's when it gets a little bit messy. Okay, so let's now do the situation where we have 2 parents that are heterozygous for both traits. Okay, and so now we want to say, okay, so what are the probabilities of getting, what are the different probabilities of the offspring that we're going to get from this cross? And in specifically, let's say, okay, what's the probability that we're going to get an offspring that is white and short, meaning that they have both recessive traits, or homozygous for both recessive traits. They'd have to be homozygous for both recessive traits. Okay, so we'd say, okay, so what's the probability of getting an offspring that is homozygous recessive for both traits, or otherwise, in other words, they have white flowers and they're short. Okay, so to figure this out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the shorter mathematical way, and I'm going to make some Punnett squares here. So we have 2 different traits, we have 2 different parents, and in this case, let's do the purple flower, so the flower color first. Both parents are heterozygous, so there's actually three different. Sorry, I did this wrong. Let me get rid of this. So we've got a big P here. So we've got 2 big P's. We're heterozygous for this. This is heterozygous. And then this is homozygous recessive. So in this case, the chance of getting big P is 1/4. The heterozygotes are 1/2. And the homozygous recessive is 1/4. And it's actually going to be the same with the T's as well, because they're both heterozygous. So it ends up being the same thing. 1/4. 1/2 of the time we get heterozygotes, and then 1/4 homozygous recessive. Okay, so now this becomes very easy, right? We have all the information that we need. Heterozygotes are 1/2. Homozygous recessive is 1/4. So we say, okay, what's the probability of getting small p, small p? Well, that's going to be 1/4. Getting small t, well, that's also going to be 1/4. And so the probability of getting an offspring with this genotype is going to be 1/4 times 1/4, or 1/16. Now, if you remember when we ran the Punnett square for this type of cross, when they're both heterozygotes, what we end up with is a 9 to 3 to 3 to 1 ratio, and 1/16 of the time is when we get those double heterozygotes. And we can see that. Let's do a Punnett square real quick. Let's see if we got this right based on our Punnett square. So if both parents are heterozygous for both traits, then the Punnett square is going to look like this. And so let's fill this out real quick. you don't want to watch me fill this out, you can speed the video up here. So I'm just filling in based on what's on each side of the square. We need a big P, small t, big P, small p. Almost there. Oops. Let's do big T and a small t there. 2 small p's here. And there we go. So there's our Punnett square. So if we look for this genotype in the Punnett square, we're going to find it right here. So 1 out of 16 are going to be this individual. Okay. All right. Let's look at another phenotype. Let's say, okay, what's the probability of getting an individual that is purple and tall, right? Purple and tall. Now this one's going to be a little bit more complicated because there's a few different options based on these parents. So we know that to be purple, they've got to be a big P, and to be tall, they've got to have a big T. But in those other 2 spaces, there's a couple different possibilities we could have. So we could have an individual that is big P, big T, small t. That's going to be purple and tall. Or we could have an individual that is homozygous dominant for all of the traits. That's going to be purple and tall. Or we could have an individual that is heterozygous for the first trait and homozygous dominant for the second trait. Or we'd have someone that is homozygous dominant for the first trait and heterozygous for the second trait. So there's actually 4 different options here that are all going to code for purple and tall. And so to figure out what's the probability of getting an individual that's purple and tall, we have to figure out the probability of each one of these separately and then add them together. So mathematically, what we'd say, okay, what's the probability of getting purple, of getting heterozygous for the P's, big P, small p? We look up here and we say, okay, that's 1/2. What's the probability of getting heterozygous for the second trait? That's also 1/2. So the probability of getting a heterozygous individual for both traits, we'd say, is going to be 1/4. Now, if we come back and look at our Punnett square, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals that meet that criteria. That's going to be 4 out of 16 or 1/4. So okay, so we're doing all right. We're figuring this out. Okay, what's the probability of getting big P? That's 1/2. Sorry, 1/4. If we look up here, gotta get my 1/2 and 1/4 straight here. What's probability of getting big T? It's going to be 1/4. So 1/4 times 1/4 is going to be 1/16. That's a little bit different. And we can see that in the Punnett square as well. Okay, so now how about this one? Now we've got a heterozygous, which is 1/2, and we're multiplying that by homozygous dominant, which is 1/4. So 1/4 times 1/2 is going to be 1/8. And then our last one is going to be the same, except it's going to be opposite. It's going to be 1/4 for the big P, and 1/2 for the heterozygous. That's going to be 1/8. So to figure out the total, we've got to add all these together. Right now, they don't all match up, so we need to change them all over to, I guess we'll change them to 16. So 1/4 is actually 4/16. 1/16 is 1/16, and then 1/8 is 2/16, and then another 2/16. So when we add these all together, we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's going to give us 9/16. We'd expect 9/16 of the time that we would get an individual that is purple and tall. How's everybody feeling? Is this feeling pretty good? I hope so. So that's a 2-trait cross. So now let's move on to a 3-trait cross and see how we do the math here. Now for the 3-trait cross, I'm not going to build a Punnett square, because the Punnett square with the 3-trait cross, the Punnett square just becomes it just becomes way too large, and we're not going to take the time to mess that. If you're welcome to do a 3-trait Punnett square. Remember that for a 3-trait Punnett square, above each column and to the side of each row, you're going to have 3 alleles instead of 2. And so you're going to have a total of a 64 square Punnett square. So like we said in class, it builds up really fast. So let's start with an easy one. Let's start with one individual that is purple, heterozygous for purple, heterozygous for tall, and heterozygous for wrinkled. And let's cross that with an individual that is white, short, and has a smooth seed. Okay. So what we want to do first, in order to figure this out mathematically, the best thing to do is to make little Punnett squares, right? So let's do a Punnett square for each of these traits and figure out what the probability of each of these individually is going to be. So let's do the color first. So based on these parents, we have one parent that's heterozygous, so we put that here. The other parent is homozygous recessive. And so what we find is the chance of becoming heterozygous is going to be 1/2. And the chance of small p is going to be 1/2. I hope you're seeing a pattern here, right? So whenever we have a heterozygous and crossed with a homozygous, it's always going to be a 50-50 to get one or the other. But just to show you that that's true, let's do the t's. So we've got a big T, small t, small t, small t. So if we fill this out here, it's really small, but big T, small t is 1/2. Small t is 1/2. And that's going to be the same with the W's too. So big W, small w is going to be 1/2. We only have two options, and small w is going to be 1/2. So we're now ready to do any sort of math problem I could throw at you. So I can say, okay, what's the probability based on these individuals, these parents, of getting an offspring that is purple, tall, and wrinkled, just like one of the parents? So in this case, there's only going to be one way to get that. It's going to be big P, small p, big T, small t, and big W, small w. And the reason that's going to be true is because this parent is homozygous recessive for all the traits. So all it can give is the recessive traits. So the dominant trait has to come from the other parent. There's no other way around it in this case. So then it's just a matter of the mathematics. So what's the probability of getting a big P, small p? Well, that's going to be 1/2. What's the probability of getting big T, small t? That's also 1/2. What's the probability of getting big W, small w? That's also going to be 1/2. So 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4 times 1/2 is going to be 1/8. So the probability of getting this genotype and phenotype is going to be 1/8. And that's going to, if we do all the different genotypes, it's going to be similar. So we could have an individual that's purple, tall, but has smooth seeds. And we could run the mathematics for this. Big P, small p is going to be 1/2. Big T, small t is going to be 1/2. And small w is going to be 1/2, 1/8. So it's not too interesting here at this point, right? So there's going to be 8 different genotypes possible, 8 different phenotypes possible, and they're each going to be 1/8. And that's how this one's going to go. So there's the math for that. So that one wasn't too bad. So let's make this a little bit more complicated. So let's change one of the parents here. So let's say that instead of being homozygous recessive for all the traits, let's say that this parent here, let's change this parent here. So one parent's going to be heterozygous. And let's say that the other parent is homozygous dominant for flower color, but they are heterozygous for height, and they're heterozygous for seed shape, okay? So now we'd have to do these little Punnett squares again, and we'd find that big P would be one option, and that would be half of the time. And big P, small p would be another option, and that would be half of the time. We do our little Punnett square. Big P, small p, big P, big P. And you can see that that is correct. So it's going to be a 50-50. Now the next Punnett square, though, we're going to have 3 options. We're going to have big T, big T, big T, small t, or small t, small t. And each of those are going to be different. So 1/4, 1/2, and 1/4. And then our last one is going to be the same. So we're going to have a possibility of big W, which is 1/4, heterozygous, which is 1/2, and then homozygous recessive, which is 1/4. Okay, so those are all the things that we need to do our math. Now we just need to say, okay, so what's the probability? What's the probability of getting an offspring that is purple, has purple flowers, okay, is tall and is wrinkled. Now you see that I put some dashes here because these are the dominant traits. We know that they have to have at least one of the dominant traits, but the other trait we don't necessarily know. So there could be a couple different possibilities. So what we have to do is figure out all the possibilities, figure out the probability of each, and then add them all up. So let's look at the first one. So what's the probability of being purple? So there's actually two ways to be purple. You'd be big P, or you could be big P, small p. Both of those would form purple flowers. The second one of being tall. So let's figure out the first one. So let me do this. Let me go back here. So let's start with the big P. So if you are big P, big T, big W, you're going to have those traits. You're going to be purple, tall, and wrinkled. But you could also be big P, big T, small t, big W, small w. That would give you the same genotype. Or you could be big P, big T, big W, small w. All three of those would give you the same phenotype, even though they're different genotypes. On the other hand, we could also do big P, small p, and then have homozygous dominant for the other two traits. Or we could do big P, small p, and do big T, small t, big W. Or we could do big P, small p, and homozygous dominant for this other two traits, and then big W, small w. So there's actually a lot of different ways that we can get the same phenotype. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 6 of these possibilities give you purple, tall, and wrinkled. So we need to figure out the probability of each of these and then add them all up. So here we go. But because we've done our Punnett square stuff, this is really easy. So the probability of getting big P, we look up there, we say, okay, that's 1/2. What's the probability of getting big T? We look up here, that's going to be 1/4. And big W is 1/4. Okay. Big P, so the next one, big P is 1/2, as we know. But now big T, small t is also 1/2. And so is big W, small w, that's 1/2. All right, next one, we've got 1/2 times 1/4. Oops, sorry, I didn't realize, so I forgot this is actually big W, small w, so that should be 1/4 there as well. And then we have big P is 1/2. Big T is 1/4. And then big W, small w is going to be 1/2. There we go. And then the next ones, same thing, it's just a different story. 1/2 times 1/4 times 1/4. Big P, small p, that's going to be 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/4. And then we have 1/2 times 1/4 times 1/2. So then we figure these out. So the first one, 1/2 times 1/4, that's 1/8. 1/8 times 1/4 is 1/32. Next one, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4 times 1/4. That's going to give us 1/16. The next one is going to be 1/2 times 1/4, which is going to be 1/8. 1/8 times 2, that's going to be 1/16. Next one, 1/2 times, so 1/2 times 1/4 is going to give you 1/8 times 4, 1/4 is going to give you 1/32. And then this one's going to be 1/16 and 1/16. So we've got 16, so we've got 32nds. So there are two 32nds and 1/16. So we've got 1/32, we've got, this is going to be 2 32nds, 2 32nds, 2 32nds, and 2 32nds. So that gives us 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So according to my calculations here, we have 2 32nds, or if we divide by 2, that's going to give us 5/16. All right, so the probability of getting an offspring that is purple, tall, and has wrinkled seeds based on these parents is going to be 5/16 out of that whole Punnett square, that 64 square Punnett square. So as long as we got all these correct, and I believe we did, as long as we got all these correct, then that's going to be the correct answer, is 5/16. All right, everybody. So hopefully that's given you some ideas about how to do use mathematics to figure out the probability of these things. Good luck, practice this. There's some practice problems on that worksheet from class. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.